But let's talk about Jimmy Butler. His first game being in Chicago, ironically enough, for the Golden State Warriors, Saturday night. They went from being down 20 to going up 25. Like, as much as Kevin Durant stylistically is the perfect fit for what Golden State wants to do, Golden State doesn't need someone who's the perfect fit. Golden State needs someone who is the antithesis of everything that they're doing. Someone who's not going to be running around the three-point line. Someone who's not going to fit in perfectly with this Steph Curry system, and that's Jimmy Butler. And, baby, let me tell you, he looked great, Fred.
Yeah, he did. And I'll tell you what, I'm not that shocked by it. I understand the concerns that some people had about his fit with Draymond, about his fit if they're going to have like Looney out there because he's not a shooter and he's a driver and all this kind of stuff. But I really am a believer that genuinely, when you have really smart, incredibly talented players, especially with a good coach like Steve Kerr, you figure out a way to just make it work. And those guys figure it out. Stephen Curry is a really smart, obviously very egoless player. And Jimmy Butler is a really smart player too. No matter how it all went down in Miami and whatever else, like Jimmy Butler is a really brilliant player who has figured out ways to maintain efficiency and team basketball even without being a shooter. And it's not the same thing as somebody who just kind of pulls up from mid-range all the time, because what he is just a free throw glutton. And that is something that is a really good element for Golden State. His playmaking is a really good element for Golden State. They now have multiple top-notch playmakers. They can have him out there. Obviously, they have Steph out there, and they have Draymond out there, and they are going to be able to have these sorts of, Kerr compared it to Andre Iguodala. And I totally see that. I totally get that. He has a sort of Iguodala sort of style to his game, and obviously is way better than Iguodala. And for all the stuff that we talk about, and I'm a huge Andre Iguodala guy for what it's worth. It's just Jimmy Butler's Jimmy Butler. And I was very critical of the way that Butler handled the entire Miami situation. I thought that one, Vin, I'm not going to give any grace to Jimmy Butler on that one. I thought it was unprofessional, and I thought he threw his teammates under the bus, and you can get upset with management and whatever else. But like, you're not supposed to throw your teammates under the bus. You're not supposed to throw the rest of the organization who did nothing wrong to you under the bus. And it turned me off. But as a player, Butler may be older. He may be hurt. He's having a really good year. Jimmy Butler is having the most efficient scoring year of his career. His effective field goal percentage right now is higher than it's been any other year of his career. Dude can still create. Dude still gets to the line. He got to the line 13 times during that Golden State game in his debut. Like, he is still a really, really good player. And that I get, if Miami was just like, we got to get off of him no matter what, I totally understand it. But if he buys in, he's still an all-star caliber player. And
look, it ain't that hard, Fred. If you give Jimmy Butler his money, he's going to be fine. If you don't, you are running the risk of your whole operation being hijacked. Like that, as simple as it is. I agree with you to a level that, it wasn't a great look for Jimmy Butler. But I more so look at Miami Heat and I say, you've seen his movies. You know exactly how he's going to cut up if you don't pay him. So if you decide not to pay him, we don't want to invest in Jimmy Butler that way. I can understand that with the games that he's missed and everything else, and the lack of top-line talent that you have as a franchise compared to someone else. But if that's the case, Fred, you know what you do? The second you say we're not going to commit to you, you do what the Dallas Mavericks did. You trade them. That's what you do. So to prevent this very thing from happening and getting ugly. Now, you said something really interesting about Jimmy Butler with the Golden State Warriors. Got to the line 13 times. When I think about Golden State having issues to score offensively, is teams loading up on Stephen Curry, and he's not the guy that's going to force the issue, get to the line, throw his body around, and slow the game down to give your defense a chance to get set. Jimmy Butler is, to me, the guy that says, when that team is on an 8-0 run, let's give the ball to Jimmy. Let's see if he can create some inertia. Let's see if he can get some swings going. He's not going to get the bucket, but he's going to get fouled, or he's going to create at least a good shot. And they haven't had that, Fred. And I asked Stephen Curry this in L.A., and Steph was like, well, who you talking about? I said, Steph, you haven't had a shot creator alongside you in a long time. And he said, who you talking about? And I said, K. He was like, yes. Because it was 2019, which was the last time that Stephen Curry played with another guy that could get his own shot and make the game easier for him. That's where Jimmy Butler fits in. He's going to make that offense that much better, and he's also going to make that defense a lot. He's going to be the Iguodala-like piece that if you're out of position, he's going to cover for you.
Yep. And let's take the other side of that too. It's not just about Jimmy Butler's creation. It's not just about a burden on Steph. What it also does is it gets Steph off the ball more.
Yeah.
So you can run him around screens and cause total havoc. And that's something that Golden State is missing, not just like with no Kevin Durant, but it was the burden on Steph running around off screens. It wasn't as large because they had Klay Thompson doing it. And it's not as big of a deal to not get the best shooter of all time running around screens and causing incredible panic in a defense. It's not as big of a deal when you can just have the second best shooter of all time do that. And then you're good. But no Klay Thompson there has just created a different element for them. It's different with Kuminga out there than it was with Klay because maybe literally nobody in the history of the league moved off the ball and created the threat off the ball that prime Klay Thompson did. And now you can get Jimmy in more of a playmaking role. And obviously this doesn't have to happen every possession. They're going to shake it up. They're going to have Steph pick and rolls. They're going to have, and they've limited their sets. Kurt talked about that because they got to integrate Jimmy into understanding the offense and knowing their plays and their terminology and all that kind of stuff. But like, they're going to be able to set up a lot of these sets where Steph is going to be able to run around two stagger screens and catch the ball on the move, and he'll be able to shoot off the move more. Or maybe he won't be shooting off the move, but other teams are going to be like, oh my goodness, that's Steph Curry running around a screen, follow him, and you have two defenders accidentally follow him and they mess up, and that opens up a backdoor cut for Kuminga, opens up a backdoor cut for Draymond or something like that. So that's something that is going to be really interesting to follow too. I'm really curious to see what the ratio of Steph on versus off the ball is going to be and what those moments with him off the ball are going to be like, because that is something that he is just as good at as he is running an offense. And you can change up that ratio a little bit.
That's probably the better use of Steph Curry at this point of his career. Like, you don't want to wear him down, having him stare down the defender in his face and also the first guy that's already cheating over because the lack of shooting that's on the floor. Now, everybody, and I found this hilariously funny, and maybe as a black person, I can say this and other people can't. Oh, well, so be it. Two strong guys get together, and the first thing that people say, man, they're going to fight. What leads you to believe that Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green just going to be out here throwing fisticuffs? Hey, that ain't either one of these guys' movies. Like when Draymond Green went after Jordan Poole, clearly, we saw exactly what that was. That won't be the case here. Like the whole passive-aggressive thing, Jimmy Butler's aggressive. So I don't think that that's going to be like any level of issue, their personalities. Like, I know both of them pretty well. Even if there's a moment of friction, guess what? You know, Fred, they don't practice. Teams don't practice anymore. These type of things happen in practice. Teams don't practice. So their first little bout of friction gonna be next year. Ain't gonna be this year. We ain't gotta worry about that. We ain't gotta worry about that at all. Now, Fred, your former New York Knicks, they got waxed at the crib by the Boston Celtics on Saturday night. Now, it obscures how well they've been playing. Like, they only had this loss and the Lakers loss like a little over a week ago, right? They've been playing really, really well. They beat up on Houston. They beat Denver. They beat Memphis. Like, they've been beating them down. What do you find interesting about the way that the Knicks have been playing lately?
Yeah, I mean, look, part of it was that the Celtics are just a monster for them.
When they decide to play, you don't have a chance.
And the Celtics have not been playing well. And they just seem to shoot the lights out against the Knicks every time now. And if you're a Knicks fan and you're concerned about the fact that they haven't beaten any of the top three teams in the NBA right now, they haven't beaten Cleveland, they haven't beaten Boston, they haven't beaten OKC, and they've lost bad in a number of those games. I understand that. I think one of the things that is the biggest flaw I would say probably the biggest flaw for the Knicks, and this is an incredible way to judge the Knicks right now, because we're judging them in their biggest flaw in terms of nitpicking them as title contenders, not in terms of being like, will the Knicks actually win 50 games? You know, this is only a flaw against basically the top three teams, or a huge flaw against the top three teams, which is that teams can just go at Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns in the pick and roll over and over again. And if Towns is not on defensively in that game, which sometimes he's not, if Towns isn't in the right places, at times he's not, then you're going to be in trouble. And we saw, like, for example, OKC do that to them, and it really, really hurt them. And those are the times where it is going to be really difficult for the Knicks. That's not really that much of an issue against the vast majority of regular season teams, but it might be an issue if they get to like the Eastern Conference Finals, and that becomes a problem. In the Boston game, they didn't have OG Anunoby. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Anunoby is their most important defensive player. He's their best defensive player.
Yep.
He is having a really great defensive season. I know they've meandered around the middle of the pack defensively this year, and that's in part because of the lack of rim protection. It's in part because they, aren't crazy deep. It's in part because, Brunson you can go at defensively because he's just got those size limitations. But Anunoby has not been a reason why. I don't think it's like a crazy serious injury. I anticipate that he'll be back at some point in the coming weeks. Like, I don't think it's like a done for a significant period of time sort of injury. When he's back, they've been playing really well defensively with him on the floor during this stretch. Like, they've been getting way more turnovers. Part of the reason why they were on this stretch where they crushed Sacramento and they beat Memphis by 30 something, and they beat Houston in a really great game, and they've been beating good teams. They beat Denver. They've been beating good teams that are playing well, and part of the reason why is because they've been a really good cohesive unit during a lot of these moments. They've been forcing more turnovers than a Tibbs defense normally does. They've been rotating better. Bridges has been very good at the point of attack during the second half of the season, which was a big change from the beginning part where I think he was struggling to get acclimated, and he's hit a new level defensively. He's been very, very good defensively, and you're starting to see like the Mikal Bridges that we expected to see coming into this season. When they're at full strength, they're really good. They are a real problem. They're really good, but they got to beat those top three teams.
Yeah, and that's where the Mitchell Robinson thing comes in, and you're like, okay, whenever he comes back, like he's gone to like another phase of his, rehab, return to play, conditioning, and everything else. But you don't know if you can depend on a guy like that, because whenever he plays really well, but he also gets hurt. And that's something you have to factor in on a team that's already really thin, and you're playing Precious Achiuwa, and we saw what happened with him. He's got to decide whether he's going to get crossed up or get dunked on. Like, you can't have both happen in the same game, dog. That's just not how this works. You got to pick your poison. That's all. Pick your poison.